You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Arya Whitner, and this is your Mae Young Classic audio report for Wednesday, October 17th, 2018. Thank you all for listening, and I apologize for the delay, as I was unable to watch the show on Wednesday night, but hey, I'm here now. Isn't that great? Anywho, this is the penultimate episode of the Mae Young Classic. Next week is the season finale, and of course the championship match will take place the following Sunday at WWE Evolution. But who's going to get that far? We will take the next step right now. So we begin with a quarterfinal match as Lacey Lane goes one-on-one with the all-time legend Miko Satomura. And from the start, Cole was pushing it that this would be the biggest upset in the history of not only WWE, not only, Full Sail University, but this would be the biggest upset in the history of all of women's wrestling if Lacey Lane were to somehow pick up the win. Satomura tried to play nice early and showed sportsmanship by offering her hand during a break. Lane refused Miko's hand, so Satomura turned her foe into 5 feet of lumps. Lane missed a kick that honestly would have missed by about 3 feet if Satomura hadn't ducked. Lane got out of an armbar attempt and countered with a series of strikes, which did get the fans behind her, but Satomura battled back with a head kick and picked up the win with the Death Valley Driver. So much for the biggest upset in the history of women's wrestling. Lane, despite not shaking hands during the match, shook hands afterwards and bowed in respect to her foe. When we move on now, it was Io Shirai versus the virtuosa Deonna Purrazzo, and it was the return of the virtuosa drinking game, as if you took a drink every time someone said the virtuosa, you would have liver damage by the end of this match. The match started slow with the ladies feeling each other out, but the pace changed just as quickly. Shirai hit her suicide dive, and just like last time she did it, somehow I was afraid she was going to come up short and land on her head. Thankfully, she didn't. Shirai stood on Purrazzo in the corner and actively counted along with the referee before breaking at 4. Purrazzo had trouble stringing together multiple moves in a row until she got in 2 hard chops. She followed those with a hip toss and her basement drop kick. Purrazzo locked on the arm bar the first time, but no one believed that Shirai would tap out, which she didn't. It was almost as if all those Gorilla Monsoon commentary sessions came into mind while people were watching this one. Shirai used the 619 and a springboard dropkick for a near fall. Purrazzo came back and used the rolling German suplexes, which haven't been seen in a while. Like, obviously, Brock Lesnar uses 5 billion German suplexes, but we haven't seen the hands clasped roll through German suplexes in quite a bit, I believe. Anywho, Shirai got locked in another armbar, and this one the fans actually bought as the finish, but Io somehow got out of it and turned it into a crossface. Shirai used her running double knees and basically what amounted to a backflip headbutt as opposed to her moonsault for the win. Up next was the most infamous match from the Mae Young Classic tapings. It was the Tegan Nox-Rhea Ripley match. Now, allegedly, Tegan Nox was on her way to the finals of this here tournament. However, unfortunately, things happen. Nox hit a suicide dive 20 seconds into the match and landed incredibly awkwardly on her knee on the ramp. And this was not the knee that she had surgery on last year before that Mae Young Classic. This was the other knee. They tried to continue, and it made me think of the Trish Lita match where Lita blew out her knee, a decade ago. The trainer came out. For some reason, they did allow it to continue. It went maybe a minute or two until they did a spot that culminated with Ripley hitting a drop kick. Knox went down and could not get back up. The referee waved it off, and the crowd, which had been into it, went deathly silent. Like, there have been times watching NXT where, there was a crowd was making no noise, and I'd say that, but like, this was like an eerie silence befell the crowd. We got polite applause when Rhea was announced the winner, which was followed by a standing ovation when they carried Knox to the back. And they actually did find women in the crowd weeping as they carried off Tegan to the back. Main event time, Toni Storm versus Mia Yim. This match only had about 8 minutes, but it was a fantastic 8 minutes. And Lord knows, this, along with several other of these matches in this tournament, I'd love to have seen it for 20 minutes. But we got 8, and they, made good use of the 8 that they had. Mia learned from her last match and didn't start this one by throwing strikes with her injured hand. She concentrated more on holds to wear down Storm and attempting to submit her. Storm, however, was content on wailing away on her injured foe with hard strikes and high-impact moves. So when submissions didn't work for Mia, she decided that what was good for the goose, was good for the gander, and she began to kick at Storm. However, Storm then kicked her right in the injured hand and hit a nasty-looking headbutt that did not, I don't believe it connected. At least if it did, it didn't have a nasty thwacking sound between the two. They did both go down, but they both fought to their knees and exchanged a series of open-handed slaps and chops. Yim hit a Saito suplex and a powerbomb for a pair of near falls. But the finish saw Storm block Soul Food, hit Storm Zero, and picked up the win. So Toni Storm moves on, and Mia Yim goes home. So the semifinals are set next week. It is Io Shirai versus Rhea Ripley, and Toni Storm versus Miko Satomura. And then the winners of those two matches square off on October 28th. Who's going to the finals? We'll find out next Wednesday. And until then, thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again in 7 days.
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.